deal with the words of the Master over in the New Testament. We are going to deal with the first tour of the land by Yeshua. I want to look at Matthew 4. We're going to read three short passages of, again, the same instance, but different perspectives. We want to talk about a little bit the differences that we find within these perspectives, things that are added based on one individual's perspective and left out, and why, and what have you. So let's first look at, we're going to read all three and then we'll go back and talk about them all. Let's first read Matthew 4, verse 23 through 25. Matthew 4, verses 23 through 25.
Matthew 24, verse 23.
Oh, chapter 4.
Oh, chapter 4, yes. Yeah. Verse 23. Yeah. And Yeshua went about all Gilead to teaching in their congregation and proclaiming the good news of the reign and the healing every disease. And reign and healing every disease and every bodily weakness among the people. And the news about him went out into all Syria, and they taught, and they brought to him all who were sick, afflicted with various diseases and pains, and those who were demon possessed, and epileptics and paralytics, and he healed them. And large crowds from Gilead and Decapolis, and I'm not used to reading the scriptures names. And what is that?
What's that over there?
Yesharus.
Oh, Yerushalayim.
Oh, Yerushalayim. And Yehuda and beyond the Yarden followed him. Woo.
Okay, very good. So I want everyone to take note of the various details. We'll come back and look at this as we compare Mark 1:35 through 39. Mark chapter 1, verses 35 through 39. We see over in Matthew, it talks about all of these different places that they went, and the things that he did. But let's look over in Mark chapter 1, 35 through 39.
All right, Mark chapter 1, verses 35. And having risen very early in the morning, while still dark, he went out and went away to a lonely place. And there he prayed. And Simeon and those who were with him searched for him. And when they found him, they said to him, all are seeking you. And he said to them, let us go into the neighboring towns, so that I proclaim there also, because for this I have come forth. And he was proclaiming in their congregations in all Gilead and casting out demons.
Okay, very good. And so keeping in mind that this is the same situation that we just read from in Matthew chapter 4, 23 through 25, is giving you slightly different things to think about, but it's the same thing. And then one more we're going to add to it before we go back and talk about all of these things in Luke chapter 4. Luke chapter 4, 42 through 44. Luke 4, 42 through 44.
Luke chapter 4, verse 42. And when the day came, he went out and proceeded to a lonely place. But the crowds were seeking him and came to him and tried to keep him from leaving them. And he said to them, to the other cities, I also have to bring the good news, the reign of Elohim, because for this I have been sent. And he went proclaiming in all congregations of Galilee.
Okay, very good. So when we think about all of these three accounts of the same situation, we see that there was this going forth around about Galilee and other places. He said that he has to go to these other places. See, you able to put that map up on the screen over there? I don't know if you're able to do it. I know you can put it on the screen on the feed, but you're able to move it over to there. Yeah, yes. Because when we look back at Matthew, it's interesting. When we look back at Matthew chapter 4 and verse 25, when it mentions Galilee, the Decapolis, Jerusalem, Judea, and Jordan. And we're able to see all of those places over there. You see Galilee up on top, the Decapolis over in the eastern region, Judea in the southern region. Beyond the Jordan is kind of east of Judea, and Jerusalem, of course, which is in Judea. It's interesting when you look at this, they didn't mention Samaria, which again, you can't go from Galilee to Judea without going to Samaria. And Matthew being, it's interesting that Matthew being an Israelite, and the kind of animosity that existed between the people, I feel like he just purposely don't mention Samaria, because it's hard to kind of see the distance. But I can't imagine going from even the southernmost points in Galilee to the northernmost point in Judea and not having to stop somehow in Samaria. But it's not mentioned. And so it's interesting when you read Matthew chapter 4, verse 25 again for us real quick. Hold on, let's see if that's what I even see over there. Oh, yeah. Matthew 4 and 25.
Matthew 4, verse 25. And large crowds from Galilee and Decapolis and Jerusalem and Yehuda and beyond the Yarden followed him.
Okay, very good. So he's going around, he's making his rounds, and you have all of these different places that are being hit where people are following him as he's going, right? But it says, and beyond the Jordan. So when you go and talking about the beyond the Jordan, it's interesting. If we go to, still in Matthew, where it says his fame went throughout all Syria. Put the map back up there again. His fame went throughout all Syria. Syria, really, when you think about what they were calling Syria at that time, with all of those places really that were named and beyond. I don't know if you could put that back up there again so you can see. Oh, there you go. Basically, that whole map right there is what they will call Syria. because that is really the rule of, Rome at that time.
Yes, it's Syrio Peninsula.
Right, so it'll have that kind of the proper name up top, up north. But there's other maps that you can find that when it talks about Syria at that time, it's all of that could really be considered that because of who was ruling, right? Where Israel had an interesting relationship with Rome, where Rome let them have their little government or whatever and do their things, and it seemed as if they were kind of autonomous, but they weren't.
Yeah, that's typically how Rome used to govern, all of the regions that it ruled. It would let them do their thing. They would just became tributaries.
Yeah. There's a word for that relationship. I can't think of it right now, but there's a word for that, the type of thing that they did where they just went around, they gained control, they let the place have their power, but really they was the power. And so it's interesting when it talks about, though, that his fame, how it goes throughout Syria, and then it names these other places. That just helps us to understand that all of these places really, at the end of the day, was actually Syria. And so if we go back, I want to go over to Mark, because there's some interesting things that we see in relation to Yeshua and the way in which he does. If we go, let's read again Mark 1, chapter 1, verse 35.
Mark chapter 1, verse 35. And having risen very early in the morning, while still dark, he went out and went away to a lonely place, and there he prayed.
Okay, very good. So when we think about Yeshua, before he started his day, Yeshua, he really had to get his mind right. Yeshua did. Now it's interesting that when we're talking about Yeshua now, we're talking about Yeshua, and when we think about Yeshua, and he gives us these different kind of pictures of himself, where he's doing a lot of different things here at once. When we see that he commands these demons to come out, he's doing these miracles with over the sick and the palsy, like people that are literally crippled, he causes to be uncrippled. Right? He's performing these miraculous dealings which only Elohim can perform. And so he's giving you that picture of his power in terms of being Elohim. But also we see the fact that Yeshua at this point in the game is in fact also a man. And it's necessary. He don't just get up and just go and do all of the things that he has to do. He really, for his own self, has to get up and go before the people get up, and he got to go and get his mind right.
You got to get juiced up. You know what I'm saying?
He has to, right? When we look at Mark, like Matthew doesn't give us that, right? Don't tell us that. When we look at Mark and Mark and Luke, it talks about the fact that he got to go and, well, even Luke don't tell you what he's doing. Luke, it says when it was day, he departed into a desert place, and the people was looking for him. It just says that he goes off and nobody knew what he was doing. But Mark lets you know that he went up a great while before it was even day, and he had to go and pray. Which it's interesting when we look at things that help us to understand the humanity of Yeshua. And these moments are things I would say that you add to the list. You think about the fact that when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane, right, where he talks about the whole thing of, the cup passing from me. We get a glimpse of his humanity. But these other moments, the temptation, when he was in the wilderness, we see kind of a glimpse of his humanity. But these other moments, when we talking about Yeshua and who we know of him to be at that time, he still had to deal with the idea of his humanity. So he needed to go and literally strengthen himself for what it is that he was getting ready to do.
I can just imagine, Yeshua, right? Here it is, the master, right? Around all of these people who want something from him. They're drawing, they want to siphon out every single blessing and every single, just moment from him, right? And then he, being this sinless man, super being, you know what I mean? Around all of this wickedness, all of these different feelings and diverse lust and all of this different things. And so he has to separate himself from all of that.
Yeah.
Go get close to the Father before he can come back and be ready to deal with that every day.
That's a whole other kind of dynamic that I didn't even think about. The fact that Yeshua being who he is and his level of holiness, and then where he went always wasn't where the holy people was. In fact, he had people sitting up here talking about calling Yeshua a wine bibber,
Right.
because of the people who he frequented. But Yeshua didn't come for the righteous, but he came for the sick and the dying, right? And so that's a whole other dynamic. Now thinking about the fact that not only is he going to these places where he's giving, and that's all he's doing is giving, right? When does Yeshua receive? He never received.
That moment when he goes away.
That's the only time. He can only receive from on high. In his relationships that he has, in his earthly relationships, he's always just giving. But we have to think about the fact that in this mode, in this time of his life, he's a man. And so it's interesting when we see this point in Mark where, he needs to go and charge up. And so how much more so do we think we who, you 100% a man. You know what I'm saying? You 100% man.
Yep.
And you think that you're supposed to be any good to anybody if you didn't really connect yourself first with the Most High? There's only so much giving you got.
I literally can talk to one person to be drained. Yeshua was doing like whole towns.
Yeah. And they sitting up there looking for him like, where you at? Meanwhile, he like, just hold up. I got to do what I got to do.
Right.
And Luke is people looking for him like, where you been at? Like, it's funny how sometimes people address Yeshua and he don't really respond to the thing. He just get into it. But he ain't dealing with just his disciples, which at this point is just really probably at this point still just the four. Just the two sets of brothers. And so he don't even got his full entourage together yet. But he's just going about and he's doing this thing. But imagine what it is that he has to go through in terms of all of the pull from all the people. But he says, he understands that's what it is. And we look at Mark chapter, where we at here? Mark chapter 1, verse 38. What's that say right there?
And he said to them, let us go into the neighboring towns, so that I might proclaim there also. Because for this I have come forth.
That's his whole reason for even being. Like he's on the mission and he's doing the mission. Like the reason why he's there is so that he could go out and deal with the people. But again, when we think about what this shows us, it helps us to understand the makeup, man's makeup. Look up. We want to go over to Hebrews chapter 4. Hebrews chapter 4 and 15. Hebrews chapter 4, verse 15.
Hebrews chapter 4, verse 15. For we do not have a high priest unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who was tried in all respects as we are, apart from sin.
Okay, very good. So I want to look at, let's see here, verse 15, feeling our weaknesses. King James is going to say infirmities. Look that word up there. Put that up there on the screen there. That is Greek word 769 there. Feebleness of body or mind, frailty, dis-ease, infirmity, sickness, weakness. It says he was a high priest which cannot be touched with the feeling of. He was not a high priest which cannot be touched with the feeling of our infirmities. He felt our infirmities. In other words, he was a man. He had to deal with the things that we had to deal with, and we see an example of that. He had to go recharge. He had to deal with his weaknesses. He had to deal with the fact that he did nothing but give and his flesh would become weak. But it helps for us to see that Yeshua, as being the example that he was, he helps for us to see the makeup actually of man. Let's go back to Deuteronomy and look at chapter 6, verse 5. Because he helps us a little bit to be able to understand how we're kind of put together. Where Deuteronomy 6 and 5, it helps us. Thinking about Hebrews chapter 4 and 15, this whole idea of these infirmities, these frailties, these weaknesses, these sicknesses. Yeshua's going around and healing these people's sicknesses, right? But at the end of the day, what he came to do was to cause there to be that spiritual healing that strengthens us the way that he was strengthened against these infirmities. But look over in Deuteronomy 6 and read verse 5 right there. Very popular.
Deuteronomy 6, verse 5. And you shall love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart and with all your being and with all your might.
Okay, very good. So it's interesting where we think about the verses over here in Deuteronomy when it deals with the way that we are to love Elohim in this holistic type of a way. Dealing with, first of all, the lave, the heart. Right? This heart, the lave, your inner self, your heart. Not necessarily the thing that beats inside of your body. When it says the heart, it's not necessarily talking about your physical, literal heart, but really talking about your inner self. The lave. Here, let me show this. Let me look at this lave. Wish I had an eraser. tent.
You turned your,
Oh, it's gotta be like
you
this.
turned your incubator around. Yeah.
I don't have no eraser. Wish I had an eraser. We gotta remember that next time.
We got,
The lathe is a tent, floor plan. So this is like this. Ooh! Now I ain't gonna have all this stuff all over my fingers.
the bait is, silver.
My bait always looks like a hay.
Yeah.
But it's a floor plan that goes like this.
Yeah. The other way.
It might be upside down
Yeah.
still. Might not be able to do it without looking at it. Oh, that's because I did it backwards on my thing. I can't, I might be dyslexic.
I think you are. The thing, it opens at the top.
Do it?
Yeah. That way up, over, down. That's weird. That's weird. Yeah, that's right.
Wow, that was difficult. So you have a lamed and a bait and another bait. So this is like a map to the house. It's the tent floor plan. So if you double that, when you think about the lathe is the heart, where it's the inner chamber. So you got this leading into the inner chamber of the inner chamber. Right? But it's talking about the heart though. And so this heart, the heart that is speaking about when it talks about the lathe, this inner dimension, is this place where it's you can't go there. And it don't touch the outside either. It don't touch the outside.
And that's why I think they said the men would be on the outside and they would put the women and the children on the inside so that there'd be protection between even the outside and the inside.
There was a barrier that was even made in the way that was set up. Israel. But it's a picture really of the person. And so when it talks about the idea of loving Elohim with your whole heart, it's talking about your innermost self. And then it also says your nephesh, your soul, which is actually the whole self though. Because it talks about in Genesis where it says that the Most High breathed into the clay and you became a living soul. What you are is a soul. When he breathed into the clay, he created this nephesh. But it's interesting that nephesh is, if you look up in Deuteronomy 6 and 5, the word for being in the Hebrew, which is nephesh, is a breathing creature. But the second thing that's there is animal. Vitality, the fact that you're alive. But if you keep on reading, you see appetite. You see pleasure. You see greedy. You see lust. But that word is soul or self. But that's what you are, though. When they said you are what you eat, it's not in the Bible, but it kind of is, though. It's implied. But that's what you are. And so, but that's part of your infirmities. Because you have these appetites that need to be governed. Which in Hebrews they're called infirmities. And so Yeshua had to go and deal with all of those things before he went and talked and gave to the people. He had to deal with his nephesh. Imagine how much patience Yeshua had to have dealing with people. It seemed like there would be more things in the scripture about Yeshua slapping people. Doesn't it seem like there should be at least one time when we can see where Yeshua just had to
I
slap
say
somebody?
more times he twist up the little whip. You know what I'm saying? Twist up, baby.
I mean, we got the one time whenever he was slapping people, but like, it seemed like there should be more, but not because of him, but because of all the people that he had to deal with.
You had a lot of things.
But that's because he got up in the morning
Oh, yeah.
and went and dealt with and got his mind right.
Yeah.
And he governed his appetites. And so when we think about, again, the way that it shows us our self, especially back in Deuteronomy chapter 6, yourself, your being the whole self, your heart being the inner self, and your might being your outer self. So in Deuteronomy, it's saying you need to love me with your outer self, you need to love me your whole self, and you need to love me with your inner self. But Yeshua, knowing that he had to go out here and be touching all these people with his outer self, he needed to go and get his inner self right first
That's right.
before he went out here and started dealing with all of these people. And that.
I guess those three things, like your outer self, inner self, I guess those are like, you know, your body, right? Your body should be, you should be doing the things that please the Most High in your body. You should be doing the things that, please the Most High with your heart and your mind. All three of those things should be, doing the will of the Most High.
Yeah. But if those things aren't governed, then that's how you get pulled to the other way, because we being these carnal beings, we're carnal beings. And what talks about our weaknesses, our infirmities, is really the fact that we have these appetites and our body wants to feed.
That's right.
It wants to be fed something and we got to feed it with something.
Right.
Yeshua figured it out. He knew that he can't sit up here and be with all these people and not get himself right first before he goes and deal with the people. Go over to Romans chapter 8, 1 through 5. Oh, look at that. Put them up on the thing.
It says, implying that giving you heart, soul, and
Your
being. Implying that giving your heart, soul, and being manifest is something other than Yahweh leads to infirmities.
Implying that giving probably your heart, soul, and being nefesh to something other than Yahweh leads to infirmities. I'm saying that our nefesh, our soul, is weak. And so it, in and of itself, is left to its own devices, leads to your weaknesses. We think about what sin is regular clean things done in an unclean way. That's what sin is. So you just giving yourself over to what your body wants to do, like a wild animal, like it says, nefesh is an animal. Animals just do whatever they want
Right.
with no governance. Well, they do have governance.
They do.
It's interesting. They do.
They're a little more disciplined than us.
I mean,
I ain't gonna front.
but at the end of the day, they do kind of self-govern.
Right.
And so it's really just when you think about your animalistic appetites, is you going after what your body wants. And so you giving into those things from a holistic perspective deals with your weakness. The flesh is in fact weak, even though you could put a whole bunch of muscles on it. But the idea of it being weak is not because it can't push heavy things. It's because in the thinking about it from a holistic standpoint, you want to be moving in a direction that's led by the Spirit, and you going opposite of that is that weakness.
Right.
And so Romans chapter 8, 1 through 5. Really, I want to talk about 2 through 5, but let's keep the context and read the first verse.
All right.
Romans 8, verse 1 through 5.
I'm waiting on you because it's hard. I need some readers. I ain't going to take this. Oh yeah, that is a big one. You know what?
It's not that much bigger.
All right, Romans chapter 8, verse 1. There is then no condemnation to those who are in Messiah Yeshua, who do not walk accordingly to the flesh, but according to the Spirit. For the Torah of the Spirit of the life in Messiah Yeshua has set me free from the Torah of sin and of death. For the Torah being powerless in that it was weak through the flesh, Elohim having sent his Son in the likeness of flesh of sin, and concerning sin condemned sin in the flesh, so that the righteousness of the Torah should be completed in us who do not walk according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit. For those who live according to the flesh set their minds on matters of the flesh, but those who live according to the Spirit, the matters of the Spirit.
So we think about the idea of being spiritually minded or carnally minded. So your mind, again, now we're not talking about your brain, like that little bumpy thing that's inside of your skull,
Right.
right? But your mind is either ruled internally or externally. It's either ruled by the Spirit or it's ruled by the flesh, by your senses.
Or other spirits.
True that. True that. And so your internal self, your spirit being, just like we thinking about if you go back to the tabernacle, your innermost self don't touch the outside. It don't touch it. It's way inside of the Holy of Holies, right? It don't touch the outside.
Don't even get outside.
It only gets its own light from the inside. It don't have no influence from the outside. It only has internal influence. The inside. And so when you talk about your flesh now, your flesh is just like how Yeshua was. Which shows us that Yeshua gives us the cheat code as to how we must move around. Because if Yeshua's doing it, we better believe that we need to be doing it too. He's showing us the fact that he, more than anyone else, is walking around and dealing firsthand with the epitome of wickedness
That's
and
what.
sickness and death. Go ahead.
One thing I don't understand about, the Christian church. They're supposed to be followers of Yeshua, but then they don't follow him. They say he did it, so I ain't got to do it. I never understood that thought process.
Yeah. It's not something that, I understand. understand either. It's kind of an osmosis kind of a thing, which is interesting, but it doesn't make much sense. He did things so that we're able to look and see what he did and mimic those things.
Exactly.
And this, more than anything, again, helps us to understand that we who live in this physical, carnal world should not think that we won't be affected by the things that are in this world when our body wants to agree with the world. Because that's what it is. And so we have to allow for our influence to be internal, the Ruach HaKodesh, and not external. And so it's interesting going back to the accounts in the gospel. It's interesting that we see with Yeshua, the first thing that he had to do, according to the account over in Mark, was go and connect himself with the Father before he was able to do anything. Like, he couldn't even deal with nobody. Like, they had to go literally and find him. He had to make sure that he was able to get that time in. And then now he says, all right, let's go. We got to get out of here. Let's go to these towns. Let's preach to these people, because that's what I came here to do. But I want to look at over in Luke. Let's go over to Luke. When we look at Luke, it's interesting when we look at Matthew. When we look at the comparison between them all, Matthew kind of really is just giving you, you don't even actually have words that Yeshua spoke over here in Matthew. It's just talking about what he did, but it's the same situation. The fact that he's going about through Galilee, preaching and teaching and making all these healings and having all these people. So it gives you kind of the idea of the multitude and the size of, the word of Yeshua getting around. Mark helps us to understand that even though Yeshua was kind of this superhuman figure, he still was human, and he needed to prepare himself for the mission. But when we go over to Luke, it also adds to this whole situation where in Mark, where it says, we got to go to the next town, we got to do this thing. But in Luke, chapter 4 and verse 43, here, read that again for us, in Luke 4 and 43.
Luke 4, Luke chapter 4, verse 43 says, and he said to them, to the other cities I also have to bring the good news, the reign of Elohim, because this I have been sent.
Okay, so he reiterates the fact that he has this mission, that he has to go out to these other cities, by the way. And again, the reason why we look at that map is because it's interesting when we think about the time frame, when we think that Yeshua is just going around talking to people that were Israel. But he was talking to a whole bunch of people. When we think about in Matthew, where it says that his fame went throughout all Syria, that goes out further than the borders of Israel. Matter of fact, Syria at the time was kind of a generic term, where it's kind of a shortened version of Assyria, which, yes, would have dealt with the formerly known northern tribe, but they were the ones who got infiltrated by the Assyrians and taken away and intermixed with all these other people. And so when we think about this idea of, you know, the fact that his fame went throughout all Syria, it's really helping you to understand that it's beyond the borders of just dealing with Israel.
I mean, if you think about it, if you hear about somebody going through healing people, and you got all kind of people that's gonna come.
Yeah.
They ain't gonna be like, yeah, he's only healing Judah.
Yeah.
Nah, his fame went abroad, and
Yeah.
everybody's gonna
Yeah.
come because everybody is waiting on the Messiah.
Yeah. And there wasn't any demand on Yeshua's healing ministry. He didn't put a demand on you. Well, I need you to come to service at such and such a time.
You gotta pay your
I need
tithes.
for you to act a certain kind of way. I need that money out your purse.
Right.
None of that. If you were sick, come and get some of this healing.
If you was hungry too.
If you was hungry, come and get some of the food. He didn't put no demands on the people for that.
They already had demands from the powers that be.
Right. Right. And so the only thing that he went to do is interesting when we see over here that he went to at that, you know, that part of what he was doing was dealing with this healing that he was doing, which was separate from the kind of teaching and discipleship thing that he was doing. It was almost as if the one thing kind of led towards the other. It was like he had this big buzz about himself, which it was a functional thing too, because he was healing people that were sick and needed help. But outside of the physical healing that he was providing for people, he also was providing something that was more long lasting, which was a spiritual renewal in people.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, if people can't see, they can't walk, you know, they have all of these ailments,
Yeah.
how they gonna hear the gospel? And they can't hear.
No, it's like you got to do the one thing in order to get to
Next
the
thing.
next part.
Yes. Yep.
And that's so interesting that, you know, you think about these people which, you know, I can't talk against, you know, people who, you know, today in these times, you know, looking for and at the forefront of this situation be like these miraculous things, like people healing and, you know, casting out devils and all of this, because these are all real things that people have to actually deal with. But it's interesting when we look at Yeshua, where he's really the total package, where, yes, he was out here doing these things, but it's like it's a precursor, because again, he wasn't putting a demand on people, and we know that he wanted for people to walk and live in a holy life.
Yep.
But he wasn't calling for you to live holy for you to come and get healed, though. Even though we know that he wanted for you to walk a certain way.
Right.
Because that part of it was just kind of like just an entry point. But it wasn't like the end all be all. And so it's interesting when we look at Yeshua, you know, in these times where this thing that he was doing, where at this point he's really being known for this, but at the end of the day, when we think about the idea of what he's preaching in Luke, was the kingdom of Elohim. And so when we think about a kingdom, it's interesting because a kingdom, I think at least got to have three things. A kingdom. There's probably more, but I think the key things that a kingdom must have. I mean, the first thing is you got to have a king.
Gotta have a king.
If there's gonna be a kingdom, there gotta be a king.
Gotta be a king.
This king is in the word kingdom. And so in that kingdom, there's going to be government, laws. There's going to be a way that the kingdom operates. There's when Yeshua talks about with his prayer that he teaches to his disciples, we talk about the things that as it is in heaven, so shall it be in earth. Well, that's talking about the kingdom that's in heaven that's going to come down and be manifest in the earth. The ways that things are in the heavenlies, those things need to come down and be manifest in the earth. So when we think about the idea of Yeshua preaching the kingdom of Elohim, we have to really think about what it is that means. Because if we think that it don't have anything to do with order or laws, it's like a dirty word, laws,
Right.
to some of these people.
Yeah. Because they rebellious.
The only people who don't like laws is anarchists.
Yes. It don't make no sense. I don't know how, I hate to keep going back to, the church, but I don't know how you have a king and you're a part of a kingdom and then he gonna do away with the laws?
I don't understand it, because I'm saying that there's three things. You got to be a king, and you got to do what the king say. You got to deal with his government. The third thing is the people, though. So the people adhere to the governance of the king.
Right.
We have a relationship. We don't rule the place. He rule it.
Yeah.
So he make up the rules, and then we follow those rules.
That makes us bad actors.
And the king, he protects his subjects. You know what I'm
All
saying? He builds the kingdom for his subjects so they can eat and thrive and
The king is a servant
yes, to the people.
to his people.
Yes.
But if we can't obey the rules that he make up, then we got to get out the
You
kingdom.
ain't in this kingdom. You can't be in this kingdom.
Can't be in the kingdom.
And so if he's saying that he got to go, he got to preach the kingdom of Elohim, all of those things he got to be talking about all of those things. He got to be talking about the fact that there's a king. He got to be talking about that there's a government. There's a way that we live under this rulership, and there's people there. And if we want to be part of that people, then there's a certain way that we got to live our life. So again, when we think about what he's out here doing, he's doing all of these things, and those things aren't necessarily directly connected. They're loosely connected, but not directly connected,
Right.
because he's not putting stipulations on you just to come in and get this healing. He's not saying, well, I need you to do this, that, and that so that I could deal with you. You don't know what's going on with these people. He just could be walking down the street and people could just be reaching out and getting the healing. He just make himself available for the healing. But then now, what comes after that?
It was almost like he was on a campaign trail.
Yeah.
He was out amongst the people, hey, welcome, hey, how you going? What you all right? I got you.
Come one, come all.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you need some of this, I got you.
I
But
mean, because there was a
then-
king of the world at that time.
Yeah, which is interesting because he's, you know, to talk about the idea of this coming kingdom in this place that really, it had a king. They had an Israelitish puppet king, and then they had the real Rome, who was the real
Right.
king. And then now he's bringing this other situation in and what he's doing.
Right.
But I think that it's important for us to understand when we think about this kingdom and this rule, that the fact that, you know, this thing that Yeshua was doing, I definitely don't want to kind of diminish it, because it definitely was a great portion of what he was doing. But it really was kind of just the open door to more, which was the fact that there is a kingdom that's coming and now is. And whoever's here hearing what's going on needs to actually be attached to this thing. And so we have to be able to understand that if we think about the idea of a kingdom, we have to think about the fact that there is, in fact, a king. I need to be trying to figure out what the king wants and how to be doing that. If I'm not doing it, then how can I be part of the people that's connected to the kingdom if I don't adhere to the government that's put forth by the king? I mean, I can understand there being a king, but is he my king though?
Right.
Because if he's my king, I need to listen, right?
Yeah.
That's right, that's right.
I mean, it's one thing to acknowledge that Yeshua is a king. But it's a whole other thing to say that he's your king and you belong to
Right.
his people, like he's reigning over you. And I think that that is a part sometimes that people miss. What'd I say? Maybe there's one rule, no rules. Oh, no. No, it can't be that,
Right.
right?
Right.
It can't be that, because we know that when he returns, he's coming back as the judge. So he's the king and he's the judge. So he's judging you based on something.
That's right.
So either you attach yourself to the people of the kingdom or you didn't.
Right.
And so those that didn't will be judged. And to me, it's just very kind of cut and dry. It's kind of a simple kind of understanding. I understand that I need to come under the rulership and protection of Messiah.
Absolutely.
And I'm not the king.
Yeah.
I'm not the king. I can't make up the rules. Imagine somebody going into a kingdom and saying what they are and are not going to be doing.
Right. Well, I don't know about you, but at one point in time, I tried to build my own kingdom. You know
How'd
what I
that
mean?
work?
And horribly. That's why I'm right here with you right now.
We have to understand Yeshua's role as king. And beneath all of the miraculous things, it's interesting that Yeshua says that a wicked and perverse generation look for signs and wonders. And that's why I wanted to point out the fact that he's not putting any demand on these people, because that's kind of just a separate kind of a thing. But the main thing that he has to be doing while he's doing all of these things, performing all of these miracles, is preaching the kingdom of Elohim, which deals with the king and the kingdom and the people. And so it's interesting, kind of just as we begin to be done for today, to think about the fact that we, as a people who say that we follow after Messiah, we still have the same task before us to perform that Yeshua spent so much time in doing. Not necessarily going out and healing the sick and raising people from the dead. Yes, that could be part of the situation, but the main thing that has to be dealt with is the fact of proclaiming the kingdom of Elohim. By all means, if somebody can't hear, you can't very well talk to them about the kingdom of Elohim or see.
If they can't see, they ain't got eyes to see.
So there has to be a point of connecting. But once connected, it has to be about the basic foundational principles of we have a king. He is the king
Of kings.
of kings. Right? He is the master of all masters. And so we have to, at some point, acknowledge that and begin to live our lives in a way that exemplifies that. And that was the main message that Yeshua had. Okay, so does anybody have any thoughts, questions, or comments about any of those things?
I would just say, make sure your citizenship in the kingdom is secure.
Yeah,
And you should look a certain way.
yeah.
When you're a citizen of this kingdom, that looks like something.
It looks like Yeshua HaMashiach. It's interesting that Yeshua gives us all that we need to, as citizens of his kingdom. He may have a demand that he puts on us, but he gives us all the abilities to be able to do the things that he would have for us to be doing.
Yeah.
It'd be different if he called for us to be a certain kind of way and didn't properly prepare us
Right.
for what it is that he wanted. But he gives you the cheat code. If he's giving you the test, you got the answers.
Right.
You got the answer sheet.
Right.
You're able to do what he wants because he empowers us all
Right.
with the Ruach HaKodesh. All we have to do is just do as Yeshua kind of pictures for us and be sure that our connection with the Father is fortified. And first, and number one, when we go out and deal with, life in general, because our main thing that we're doing might necessarily be to go out and do whatever it is that he would have for us to be doing kind of big picture wise. But we still have to go out and kind of interact with this world, which is like what it is that Yeshua dealt with, where we have wickedness all around.
Right.
And if you think that you're able to go out and be in the midst of wickedness and not be affected by it, you're better than Yeshua. Because he,
You got to have your armor on.
all that. All right, so if no one has any questions, comments, today is Shabbat. Tuesday, we'll be back here for atonement. We'll be back here for atonement at 1 o'clock. It will be the Day of Atonement. And after that, we'll be off in the wilderness. And so, you know, we've already begun our 7th month festivities, and we'll be looking forward to the Day of Atonement, because even though we know that we have that time of afflicting our souls, we can think about the fact that once we've done that, the Sukkot is right around the corner. And so just remember everyone to think about Tuesday, starting on Monday evening, you begin your fast into Tuesday, and we'll have our meeting here at 1 o'clock sharp.
And next time we'll be back together, it's gonna be Sunday.
Yes, Sunday out at the feast.
October 8th.
I will have to see what our connectivity is. It might not be live, but what we're gonna try to do is definitely record and get it out. We might be able to go live. We'll see what our situation is. But plan on, I would say, something after the normal time, because we'll be out in the wilderness.
We'll be back on October 8th, Sunday, October 8th for the last great day here,
Okay, yes.
1 o'clock.
Yes, exactly that. All right, so that being said, we'll say Shabbat Shalom for now. We will be back.